I came home from a quiet fishing trip expecting pine trees and silence, and instead found a concrete slab blocking the only road to my house. Not near it, not beside it, right across it. Like someone had decided my life needed a locked door and just poured one in overnight. And the craziest part, the people who built it didn't think they'd done anything wrong. I own about 8 acres out here, nothing fancy, but it's mine, and more importantly, it's quiet. The kind of quiet you can't buy in a city, the kind that settles into your bones after a while. The land is mostly pine and oak, with a long dirt driveway that curves in from the county road like it's trying to disappear on purpose. That driveway has been there since the late 80s, long before I bought the place in 2009, and it's always been understood by everyone around here that it sits entirely on my property. I've got the survey, the markers, the whole deal, and I maintain it myself, clearing branches after storms, filling ruts, keeping it passable year-round. It's not just a driveway. It's access. It's privacy. It's the one thread connecting me to the outside world. Most of the folks out here respect that kind of thing. You don't mess with someone's land, and you definitely don't mess with their access. That's just how it works. Or at least, how it used to work. About a year before everything went sideways, the lot next to mine sold. It had been empty forever, just overgrown brush and a few old survey stakes leaning like they'd given up. Then one day, trucks rolled in, and a couple from out of state showed up, Daniel and Claire Whitmore. New York people, you could tell right away, not just from the plates, but from the way they carried themselves, like everything was temporary except their expectations. They told me, the first time we met, that this place was their escape. A break from the chaos, Claire said, standing there in brand new boots that had never seen mud before. Daniel was friendlier, at least on the surface. I met him while I was dragging a fallen branch off my driveway after a storm. He pulled up, rolled down his window, smiled like we were already neighbors in some magazine ad. Asked about the area, how long I'd been there, if the winters were rough. I told him the truth. It's quiet, it's honest, and yeah, you take care of your own problems out here. He nodded, said they were planning a modern farmhouse, something clean, open, integrated with nature. That was his phrase. I remember thinking, nature doesn't need integration, it's already doing fine. But still, they seemed harmless enough. City folks with money, looking to build something pretty and pretend they'd always belonged here. We've had that before. Some stay, some don't. Usually the land sorts them out. For a while, things were normal. Surveyors came through, marking boundaries, builders showed up, clearing their lot, and I stayed out of it. Not my business. As long as they stayed on their side, we were good. Then I left for a week. Just a simple fishing trip, no signal half the time, no reason to check in with the world. When I came back, I turned onto my driveway like I always do, slow, letting the tires settle into the familiar grooves, and then I stopped. Not slowed down. Stopped. Because where my driveway curved toward the house, there was concrete. Fresh, pale gray, still sharp at the edges, with wooden forms half removed and steel rebar sticking up like broken bones. It stretched straight across the road, wide enough for what was clearly going to be a 2-car garage. For a second, I honestly thought I'd taken a wrong turn. That maybe I'd drifted onto someone else's land without realizing it. But no. There was my fence line, my trees, the old marker post I'd painted red myself. This was my driveway, and someone had built right across it. I got out of the truck, walked up to the edge of the slab, boots crunching on gravel that used to be part of my road, and I just stood there. There's a kind of disbelief that doesn't hit all at once. It kind of rolls over you in waves, like your brain is trying to rewrite what you're seeing into something that makes sense. But this didn't make sense. Not even a little. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring, calm as ever, like I was calling to borrow a tool. "Hey man," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You've got a foundation poured across my driveway. I can't get to my house." There was a pause, not long, just enough to tell me he wasn't surprised. "Oh, yeah," he said, almost casually. "We thought that section was part of our lot." I blinked, looking down at the concrete again, like it might explain itself if I stared hard enough. "No," I said, slower this time, "it's not. My survey shows the driveway is completely on my property." Another pause. Then he chuckled, like we were talking about a minor mix-up. "Well, the builder measured from the road. Should be fine. And honestly, you could just drive around it, right? Through the woods." That was the moment something shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. No, I said. I'm not driving through the woods to get to my own house. You built on my land. That needs to be fixed. His tone changed, just a little, but enough. The friendliness thinned out, like a mask slipping. Look, he said. We've already poured the foundation. The garage is going up. If you've got a problem with it, take it up with a lawyer. And just like that, the conversation was over. I stood there for a while after he hung up, staring at that slab, feeling something settle in my chest. Not panic, not even anger, something colder than that. A kind of certainty. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. And they were betting I wouldn't fight it. I didn't call him back. There wasn't anything left to say. Not the kind of conversation you fix with another round of polite words. This had already crossed into something else, something colder, more deliberate, and I could feel it in the way he said, take it up with a lawyer, like he'd already planned for that outcome and was comfortable with it. So I got back in my truck, reversed all the way out to the county road, and drove straight into town. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who runs to lawyers over every little thing out here. Most problems get handled with a conversation, maybe a handshake, sometimes a tense afternoon and a beer after. But this wasn't that. This was someone building a permanent structure on my land and blocking the only legal access to my home. That's not a disagreement. That's a line being crossed with a concrete mixer. Paul Henderson's office sits above an old hardware store, nothing flashy, just a small sign and a creaky staircase that's probably older than both of us. Paul's been practicing property law in this county longer than I've lived here, and he's the kind of man who doesn't waste words, which is exactly what you want when things get serious. He looked at me over his glasses when I walked in, saw my face, and just said, "What happened?" I didn't sit down right away. I just told him. All of it. The new neighbors, the slab, the phone call, the suggestion that I drive through the woods like I was trespassing on my own land. By the time I finished, he was already pulling out maps, files, a thick folder that held my original survey from when I bought the property. We spread everything out on his desk, paper overlapping paper, lines and measurements and coordinates that suddenly felt a whole lot more personal than they ever had before. He traced the boundary with his finger, slow and deliberate, then tapped the line where my driveway ran. "Your driveway is here," he said, calm as ever, "and their garage, if what you're saying is accurate, is sitting right on top of it." "It is," I said. He nodded once, like he'd already reached a conclusion. "Then this isn't complicated. They can't build there. Legally, they're in the wrong. Completely." There was something reassuring about how simple he made it sound, but I'd lived long enough to know that simple and easy aren't the same thing. "What are my options?" I asked. He leaned back slightly, folded his hands. "First, we give them a chance to fix it. I'll send a formal notice, 10 days to remove the structure and restore your access. If they don't comply, we go to court and request immediate relief. Given the circumstances, a judge isn't going to like this." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "And if they still don't move it?" Paul gave a small, almost dry smile. "Then eventually, you'll be authorized to remove it yourself. At their expense." That last part stuck with me. Not because I was looking forward to it, but because it told me this wasn't just about being right. It was about being prepared to follow through. Paul sent the letter that afternoon. Certified, documented, the kind of paperwork that doesn't leave room for misunderstanding. 10 days. Clear language. Remove the structure. Restore the driveway. For a couple of days, nothing happened. No calls, no messages, just the quiet hum of normal life trying to pretend everything was fine. I couldn't even get to my own house, so I stayed with a friend in town, which felt strange, like being displaced from your own life. Every morning I'd drive out to the property, park at the edge of that concrete slab, and just stand there, looking at it. It didn't get less absurd with time. If anything, it settled in deeper. On the 4th day, a response came. Not from Daniel, from a law firm out of Manhattan. Thick letterhead, polished language, the kind of tone that tries to sound reasonable while quietly telling you they don't intend to give an inch. Paul read it out loud, occasionally pausing to let out a soft breath through his nose, which I learned meant he wasn't impressed. "They claim," he said, "that their clients relied on their builder's measurements, and that any encroachment was unintentional." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Unintentional doesn't unblock my driveway." "Exactly," Paul said. Then he continued, "They're requesting that you demonstrate measurable damages, and they proposed negotiating an easement. I frowned. An easement? He looked up at me. They want you to grant them legal rights to use that portion of your land so the garage can stay. I actually laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because of how far it went. So they build on my driveway and then ask me to give it to them? Paul's expression didn't change. That's one way to put it. I shook my head. No, absolutely not. That driveway is the only way in and out. That's not negotiable. He nodded. I didn't think it would be. That same afternoon, he filed for immediate relief. No more waiting, no more polite back and forth. We took it straight to the court. And that's when things got interesting. Because instead of slowing down, Daniel's crew sped up. I drove out there one morning and found walls going up. Wooden frames rising from that same slab like it had every right to be there, like the argument had already been decided in their favor. A couple of workers were hammering in beams. Another guy was measuring for what looked like roof trusses. It wasn't just a foundation anymore. It was becoming a building. I walked right up to them, asked who was in charge. A foreman stepped forward, wiping his hands on his jeans, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. You know this is disputed, right? I said. He hesitated. We've been told to keep working. By who? Owner's instructions, he said, shrugging slightly, like he was caught in the middle. Which, to be fair, he was. I didn't argue with him. It wasn't his fight. I just pulled out my phone and called Daniel again. He answered quicker this time. They're still building, I said, keeping my voice steady. On land that's in dispute, with legal action already filed. You need to stop construction. There was no pause this time. No hesitation. My lawyer advised us to continue until a judge tells us otherwise, he said. Flat. Certain. I closed my eyes for a second, just to keep everything level. You're making this worse. Or, he replied, we're finishing what we started. That was it. No room left between those positions. After that call, I didn't go back for a few days. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew watching it go up piece by piece was only going to grind something down inside me. Instead, I put my trust in the process, in Paul, in the court, in the idea that there's still a line somewhere that people aren't allowed to cross without consequences. 6 weeks passed like that. Slow, stretched thin by waiting, punctuated by updates from Paul and the occasional drive-by, just to see how bad it had gotten. By the end of it, the garage was almost complete, walls up, partial roof in place, something that looked solid enough to convince a stranger it had always belonged there. But it didn't. And eventually, the court date came. By the time we walked into that courtroom, the whole thing had stopped feeling like a misunderstanding and started feeling like a test, not just of the law, but of whether it actually meant anything when someone decided to ignore it. I wasn't nervous the way people think you'd be, no shaking hands or pacing. It was quieter than that, more like a steady pressure in your chest, the kind that builds when you've been pushed far enough that there's no version of this story where you just let it go. Daniel and Claire were already there when I arrived, sitting on the opposite side with their attorney, dressed sharp, composed, like they were attending a business meeting instead of explaining why they'd built a structure across someone else's access road. Daniel caught my eye for a second, gave me this tight little nod. Not friendly, not hostile either, just transactional. Like we were two parties in a deal that hadn't closed yet. Paul didn't waste time on small talk. He had the survey maps, photographs, documentation of the blocked access, everything laid out clean and simple. That was the strategy, no drama, no theatrics, just facts that didn't leave room for interpretation. When the judge came in, the room shifted, not dramatically, just enough to remind everyone that this wasn't a negotiation anymore. This was a decision. Judge Holbrook was older, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to control a room. You could tell, just from the way he listened, that he'd seen every version of neighbor disputes. There was fences in the wrong place, trees cut down out of spite, access roads blocked out of stubbornness. And there was something about the way he flipped through the file, slow and deliberate, that made me think he already knew where this was going. Paul spoke first, laid out the timeline, my ownership, the established driveway, the survey confirming its location, the construction of the garage directly on top of it, and the fact that it blocked the only legal access to my home. No exaggeration, no extra weight, just the truth, clean and unbent. Then Daniel's attorney stood up, and you could feel the shift in tone immediately. Polished, confident, the kind of voice that tries to smooth over sharp edges. He talked about good faith reliance on builder measurements, about unintentional encroachment, about how his clients had invested significant resources into the construction. He even brought up the idea again that an easement could resolve the situation in a way that benefited both parties. I remember looking at Daniel when he said that, just for a second. He didn't look back this time. The judge didn't interrupt, didn't react, just listened. Then he turned back to the documents in front of him, specifically the survey. He studied it for a long moment, tracing lines with his finger, then set it down. "The survey is clear," he said, his voice even, almost quiet. "The structure in question is located on the plaintiff's property, and it obstructs lawful access." That was it. No long explanation, no drawn-out reasoning. Just clarity. He continued, "The defendants are ordered to remove all encroaching structures within 14 days. Failure to comply will authorize the plaintiff to remove said structures at the defendant's expense." 14 days. You could feel it land in the room. Not like a hammer, more like a door closing. Final. Outside the courtroom, Daniel finally spoke to me directly. "This isn't over," he said, his voice tight now, the calm from before worn thin. "You're making a mistake." I looked at him, really looked this time, and there was something different there. Not confidence, not anymore. Frustration, maybe, or the realization that things weren't bending the way he expected them to. "No," I said. "You made it when you poured that foundation." He didn't respond, just turned and walked away. The next 2 weeks, nothing changed. That's the part people always ask about. Did they really just ignore a court order? Yeah, they did. Maybe they thought I wouldn't follow through. Maybe they believed something would come up, some delay, some last-minute negotiation. Or maybe they just couldn't accept that the situation had shifted out of their control. Either way, the garage stayed exactly where it was. Walls, partial roof, framing solid enough to look permanent, like it was daring me to do something about it. On the 15th day, I did. I showed up early, just after sunrise. The air was cool, quiet the way it always is out there before the day starts moving, and for a moment, standing at the edge of that structure, I could almost remember what it felt like when this place was just mine, uninterrupted, simple. Then I heard the rumble of engines. Tony rolled in first, local contractor, been around longer than most people in this county, the kind of guy who doesn't ask unnecessary questions. Behind him came the crew and the excavator, big, yellow, heavy enough to make a statement before it even moved. Paul was there too, clipboard in hand, documenting everything, making sure this stayed exactly where it needed to be, within the lines of the order. We'd already notified the sheriff's office the day before, just in case things got complicated. Tony stepped out of his truck, looked at the garage, then at me. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. "Court order's clear." He didn't say anything else. Just turned, gave a signal to his crew. And then it started. There's something surreal about watching a structure come down, especially one that wasn't supposed to exist in the first place. The excavator arm lifted, paused for a second like it was choosing where to begin, then came down hard against the sidewall. The sound wasn't as loud as you'd expect, more of a deep crack, like something giving way all at once. The wood splintered, the frame shifted, and then the whole side collapsed inward. Dust rose up, drifting through the morning light. Piece by piece, it came apart. Walls folding, roof sections caving in, concrete breaking under repeated force until it fractured into chunks that no longer resembled anything intentional. The rebar twisted and snapped free, dragged out of the ground like roots being pulled up. It took less than 6 hours. By early afternoon, the garage was gone. Not dismantled, erased. All that was left was debris being hauled away and the original line of my driveway, visible again, like it had been holding its breath the entire time. I stood there for a while after the machines shut down, listening to the quiet settle back in. It felt different. Not triumphant, not exactly. Just resolved. That's when Daniel and Claire showed up. They pulled in fast, tires kicking up dust, both of them stepping out before the engine had even fully cut. Claire just stared at the scene, hands over her mouth, while Daniel walked straight toward me, his face pale in a way that had nothing to do with the sun. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, his voice cracking somewhere between anger and disbelief. "That was our property. You just destroyed it." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the folded copy of the court order, and handed it to him. You had 14 days, I said. This was day 15. He didn't take it at first, just looked at it like it might burn him. Then he snatched it, scanned it quickly, his jaw tightening with every line. This isn't over, he said again, but this time it sounded smaller. Maybe he believed it. Maybe he had to. A few weeks later, he tried to sue, claimed damages, around $18,000, said I'd destroyed a structure they'd invested in. But it didn't go anywhere. The judge dismissed it almost immediately, said the order had been clear, the timeline had been clear, and they'd chosen to ignore both. In the end, they were ordered to cover my legal fees and pay for the damage their construction had caused to my driveway and the surrounding trees. And then, just like that, it was over. The driveway's still there now, same curve, same gravel, maybe a little smoother in places where it had to be repaired. The woods haven't changed. The quiet came back. But every once in a while, when I drive past that spot, I think about how easily this could have gone a different way. How a simple conversation could have prevented all of it. Or how, if I'd just let it slide, I might be the one still trying to find a way around something that never should have been there in the first place. So I'll leave you with this. If someone builds on your land, do you fight it, even when it gets messy, or do you let it go to keep the peace? And at what point does keeping the peace just mean giving something up that you'll never get back? Let me know what you think, because out here, lines matter, and once they're crossed, they don't always get drawn back the same way.